It seems like everyone is always in pursuit of the perfect watch, but I personally don't believe the perfect watch exists, at least not the perfect watch for everyone. And again, with divers, everyone wants the perfect diver. Yet, nothing's perfect. But I gotta say, as divers go, this comes pretty close. And for those of you who recognize it, that's probably not a surprise. This one's been out for a little bit and everyone pretty much loves it. It's the Christopher Ward C60 Trident Pro 300. And this particular one, with its clean, crispy white dial, was lent in by a viewer. So a big thank you goes out to Larry for lending this in. Now, since a lot of people are already pretty familiar with this one, we're not going to do the standard review, but we're more going to focus on the pros and cons, with 5 reasons to buy and 5 reasons not to. And I'll warn you right now, with this one, there's not a lot to complain about, so some of these may get a bit nitpicky. But I set out to give you 5 reasons why you shouldn't get it, and I'm going to give you 5 reasons. That said, the first reason to buy this one is simply that it's practically the perfect tool watch. This design here is on point, where you have a large, easy-to-read dial with just a splash of colors to make things interesting. Yet the emphasis is still on the hands and the indices, which have just enough depth and texture thanks to the brushed finish on the hands to easily stand out, despite the white loom filling them in. And the design as a whole comes across as something beautifully crisp and clean. This is then paired with a fantastic case, one that is a tool watch, there's no mistake about it. Yet thanks to the curvy sides and the polished chamfers, they call this one a light catcher for a reason. And with that, there's just enough hint of flash to keep things interesting. And perhaps that's what I love most about this one. Just how subtle a watch it is, yet at the same time, the indices in that light catcher case do just that. Catch the light, and just enough to bring your focus to the beautiful simplicity of the design. I think when Christopher Ward went to design this one, they really went in trying to create an ideal, straightforward modern diver. And I think that's exactly what they did. It's a watch that feels familiar, yet it's one that would never be considered an homage, which is saying something in today's watch world. Now, for reason number 1 not to buy it, and remember I said I was going to get a little bit nitpicky here, is that the design isn't perfect. It's close, but there are a few things here. Like the crown. Visually, I think it looks a little large in proportion to the case. It sticks out just a little too much. But, the flip side to that is that it is pretty easy to get a hold of and use. And there does have to be some sort of balance between form and function in the design. And another nitpick here is going to be with the bracelet, that it has male end links and not female, which is becoming more common and, in my opinion, far more comfortable, as it brings down the effective lug-to-lug and makes the watch more accessible to more people. However, with this particular watch, the 40mm version, lug-to-lug is just under 48mm, and on my 7¼ inch wrist, I gotta say, it's just about the ideal size. So while I am being a bit nitpicky, in reality I can't really complain too much. And speaking of the size, this leads to pro number 2. That's Christopher Ward gives you plenty of choices, in that this is the 40mm version, but they also offer this in 38 and 42. As well as 4 different colorways and a choice between 2 different straps and 2 very different bracelets. So regardless of wrist size, there should be something here for everyone. Well, almost everyone. Because if you're someone that may like watches that are a little different, a little unusual like this, Christopher Ward just won't do. Which sometimes happens when you have a lot of watches already, you've been collecting for a while. Because at that point, you already have your basic bases covered, and you kind of want something that stands out in your collection. A good way to look at the Christopher Ward Pro 300 is that it's kind of the iMac of the watch world. That if you're looking for an idealized watch, this is pretty much perfect for what they're trying to do. Like I said earlier, for a lot of people, this is what an ideal modern tool watch should be. And in that way, it's great for most people. But for those that want something that stands out, something different, those that like to take the path less traveled, they might consider this a little bit boring. For instance, let's say you want something with a little bit more flash. Well, Wise Timepiece offers a completely polished 904L case that might be better for you. Or let's say you want something with a little bit more of a vibrant dial or adventuring, at which point you might want to wait for the next Zelos release. Or if you want something completely different, Seiko's special edition dials are just that. And this watch right here, which is what I was holding, is a great example of that. This is my Seiko Glacier Marine Master Reduced, which these days I think you can find for just about the same price. And I gotta say, as much as I love this watch, the Trident is far superior in almost every way, and I'd recommend it 9 times out of 10 to other people. Yet between the two, for me personally, I'd pick the Seiko. I just love this Glacier dial, there's nothing else like it. Now, one of the big reasons I say I'd recommend this watch isn't just because it's a fantastic design, but that it's almost perfectly executed as well. The overall design here may not have a ton of flash, but break out the macro lens, and that's really where this watch starts to impress. From these shots, you can see that all the hands and the indices have a good depth with well-defined angles and edges. Everything comes across crisp and clean. And remember, this is a white dial which tends to show more imperfections. So for what Christopher Ward is trying to do, the fit and finish here is practically perfect. And honestly impressive for the price. Which is even more obvious when you compare it to other watches in this price range. It easily has a better execution. Now, if you're comparing this to something a bit higher end, that's maybe where this is going to fall a little bit short. Like, let's say I compare this to my Oris. I would say that the level of execution would be close, but the designs of the hands and the indices are less sophisticated on the Christopher Ward, meaning they're easier to do, which is perhaps where those higher end watches are going to pull ahead. But for the price, Christopher Ward is just hard to beat. And if you're someone that has no interest in luxury watches, a good Christopher Ward could easily be your endgame watch for your collection. The last watch you ever buy, and you'd be perfectly happy with it. Now, let's go back to the dial and take a closer look at the very top. Right here at the logo, because this is really the third reason not to get it. The branding on Christopher Ward has always been a bit controversial, a bit problematic. Like in the past, it was just their name, which took up a big bit of the dial real estate. And for many, myself included, the name on the dial was just a huge turnoff. Yes, it does sound a little bit petty, but remember, us watch folks can be a bit picky. Now, eventually Christopher Ward did change the logo to this, which is a huge improvement. And this is supposed to represent the flag of England next to the flag of Switzerland, showcasing what the brand is really about, kind of a bridge between the two cultures, or maybe showcasing the best of both. But the thing is, if you didn't really know that and you first saw this, it kind of looks like a goofy QR code that you almost want to take out your phone and hold it up to see if you get a URL. And because of that, some people just can't stand this new logo. Like I said, us watch folks are picky, and if you're one of those, it just is what it is. For Pro number 4, this one is a Spec Monster. Meaning, it's got everything you could want in a great everyday diver. Now, I'll throw the dimensions up at the side, and you'll see that it hits the sweet spot in terms of size, weight, and thickness. But on top of that, we're talking sapphire, ceramic, screwed down crown, 300 meters of water resistance, custom rotor, cool looking case back. There are solid quick release end links, and ones that just work, I might add. As I've seen some quick release end links in the past that are a pain to get off, where you have to break out a tool just to help. But these that Christopher Ward put out are perfect. There's also a milled clasp with a great quick adjust, making it even more comfortable to wear. And there's really only one thing that I think is missing, and that's a scratch-resistant coating. But, with this design that's mostly brushed, it is less critical than some of the more dressier divers. Although, one thing it's not missing is great lume. Which you would almost expect on a diver at this price, but that's something I've found not always to be true. As some of the nicer divers I've looked at seem to be more focused on the design and the finish, to the point that lume really is an afterthought. Or even more on some of the more recent Seikos, like the Marine Master Reduced and the Slim Turtles. Seiko's really slipped when it comes to lume. Those have worse lume than their entry-level divers. So great lume isn't always the case with more pricier divers. but it is for Christopher Ward. It's got great lume that's nice and bright and should last mostly through the night. Now, for con number 4, we're going to look way down here at the bottom of the dial. See that? Swiss made. And oftentimes, that's a positive thing to see. But you really got to remember what Swiss made means, which is simply 60% of the value has to come from Swiss sources. And that doesn't mean parts value, that means total value. And oftentimes, that means these are really just Swiss assembled. And that's true with most Swiss watches in this price range. With them, most of the parts are still manufactured in China, just like almost every other watch that's not a luxury watch. So while a lot of people do take comfort when they see Swiss made and sometimes even brag about it, honestly, it doesn't mean that much, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's better quality than we're getting with other brands. And this right here is also a good time to talk about the movement. Christopher Ward is using a Sellita SW200, a good Swiss movement. One a lot of people have faith in and has a pretty good track record. But, if you do compare this to, say, a cheaper Miyota 9015, the specs aren't much different. Now, I can already hear some of the comments about what I'm about to say, but there is an argument to be had that the 9015 is actually better than the Sellita, or at the very least on par. Just because it costs more doesn't necessarily mean it's better. I'm not going to get into it too much, but let's just say there's an argument there. And this is a bit of a debate in the watch world. But the main reason I'm pointing it out here is that a lot of the Pro 300's competition will be sporting that 9015, and some of which you could potentially get for a better price. Although it is worth pointing out that price and value aren't always the same thing. And this does lead us to our 5th reason to buy it. And that's that Christopher Ward has struck an almost ideal balance between price and the quality of their divers, offering a lot of value. Meaning that even though the price is higher than some of the other options out there, there's still a lot of value here with Christopher Ward. Just look at the specs, the fit and finish, and some of the extras, like the quick release end links and quick adjust clasp. I think there are very few brands out there that come close to what Christopher Ward is doing, with perhaps Wise watches being one of the few that may beat Christopher Ward in terms of value. Although before you go look at Wise, just know that they're more focused on flashier, dressier divers, which is very different than this. And if this is what you want, there's not a lot of competition out there at this price that could rival it. However, con number 5 is also related to price, and that's that for many of us, the price is higher than you think. And I'm specifically talking to those of us in the United States. Because here, Christopher Ward is one of the biggest brands we always have to pay duty taxes on. For other parts of the world, I know you guys always get screwed, so you kind of expect it. But here in the US, we don't. We don't really pay duty taxes on something unless it's over $800. And there's a long history of people just surprised about it when they get their Christopher Ward along with a bill for duty taxes. One nice thing is that Christopher Ward now lets you pay that duty taxes up front, so it's not going to be as big a surprise as it has been in the past. But still, if you look into it, it's about another 10%, and that does add to the bottom line and hurts the value a bit for us here in the US. And as a side note, I've heard that they are opening some retail stores in the US, one of which is supposedly coming to the Dallas area. And when that opens up, hopefully that'll help you avoid that. And speaking of price, this kind of also brings up another point. Not something that's a negative against the watch, just something to kind of whine and bitch about. At least for those of you who've been collecting for a while. And that's when you look at Christopher Ward's prices, you notice they've gone up quite a bit in recent years. Christopher Ward used to have the best diver under $1,000, and that was with a bracelet. And now it's just about over that. And like I said, this really isn't a negative against the watch because this is happening across the board, but still something to complain about because inflation just sucks. Bottom line, at this point, you're probably sick of hearing me say the word perfect. But when it comes to divers, this is pretty close. The Christopher Ward Trident Pro 300 is kind of like the 3 Series of the watch world. The design as a whole may not be as interesting as some other options out there, but it's something you'll appreciate more and more every time you put it on your wrist, as it offers an ideal experience. And when you're looking down at it, you'll have a hard time thinking of anything you might be missing. So if you happen to be considering a diver in this price range, honestly, you'd be a fool not to at least consider it. Now, as usual, let me know your thoughts down below on the diver, on Christopher Ward, or just whatever you're thinking about. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, you guys know what to do. It's pretty standard these days. I'm Shane, this is Relative Time, and I'll see you next time.